mighty three.
I know.
So first of all, tell me about how you did with the different try thises from last time. What did you discover through the last week?
Judy, did you do that?
No, I didn't consciously do it. I'm aware that I'm not sure that I have to consciously call upon my ancestors.
Uh-huh.
I feel like they're there all the time. I mean, my grandmother was an immigrant from Sweden. Both my mother's parents were immigrants from Sweden at the turn of the century and homesteaded outside of Chicago, which is just mind-blowing to me.
Mm-hmm.
That would have been farmland.
Yeah.
Instead of this mega metropolis that it is now. And I just sort of feel their wings hovering around. I don't, I think it's partly my expectation. I don't expect clear, definitive messages like Julia Cameron was talking about. And maybe that's because I don't need them. I don't know.
I think you're looking at it well, Judy. You know, different people need the voices of their ancestors in different ways.
Well,
it doesn't have.
I rely on that example of that strength and that determination, but I don't. I have never really expected to hear directly.
Yeah.
But I did know her, and you know, she wasn't much of a storyteller, but she was a really strong presence.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
and I think some of that is just personality, Judy. I'm not saying that you're not a conversationalist, but that's the way some people frame their every interaction is through conversation. And so, and I think that's what Julia Cameron does, is she sees the interaction by hearing that they said to me.
right.
You know, and for me, my interaction with my ancestors tends to be more of a, they acted this way. They did these things. So it's a looking at the past rather than a hearing them in the present, which is what it sounds like you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. Catherine, how about you? How did you listen to your ancestors this week?
I'm not sure if I did or didn't. I think I more or less listened to some commentary that my sister had when we were talking, and she's quite a bit older, so she sees things in a different light. We had some.
I'm sure because she's quite a bit older, she appreciates you calling her the ancestor.
No, she probably wouldn't too much, but then again, it might just roll right off of her. But sometimes I'm feeling like the ancestor lately. But we had some, disturbing news about a family member that a cousin of mine's child. He's an adult child, and he has the return of a brain cancer, and it's serious. He's not quite. Will be 50 in June, and my thought was to reach out to my cousin Joy and make a comment where my sister. It was another cousin that had called and notified us, and then my cousin spoke also with my sister, and then my sister and I talked on Saturday. But anyway, my sister said, well, Joy has different thoughts about spirituality and the church and religion, and she thinks all the Methodists are a cult, and of course we're not, but she's a little more, she's pretty straight-laced, and so she said, I just want my other cousin to let her know that I'm thinking about Dean, and praying that he will be able to make the best choices for himself. And after reflection, I haven't reached out to my cousin as yet, and I may or may not do so because I don't wish to offend her either in some inadvertent manner. Although I'm concerned because he has two fairly young children, and he's just weighing whether he should seek treatment or not, and in what form. So it's pretty heavy duty. And obviously, if any of you've dealt with those kinds of things in your family life in some form or fashion, what do you really say to someone that doesn't sound canned? But, to me, if I want to say something, I want it to be heartfelt and more significant. So when in doubt, just wait a bit. So I guess that's my thoughts.
And thank you for sharing that. I'm so sorry that your family is having to go through that, because there's a lot of simplistic answers there, but there's no simple answer.
And
people try to just solve it for us.
He's very realistic. I think he's been through this before when he was about 32, about 18 years ago, and he was a really young man, and he didn't get married until maybe about 10 years ago, and then had a couple of children. And because I think he took it pretty seriously at the time, and it was a serious diagnosis back then. And now it's serious in that, unfortunately, that chemotherapy and also the
Radiation.
and then they were going to maybe do like surgery or something even, but he's seen what happens to people that have it. They end up being like not themselves anymore.
Yeah.
My mother had that, and she had chemo and radiation and 2 operations. And from when she was diagnosed to when she died was 9 months. And it's just, it's just not easy. It's not easy. It's difficult. She died 27 years ago, so we've obviously processed it. But at the time, it's a situation that it's not just that person that's going through it. The whole family needs to know, what do you say and how do you deal with it? And
it calls so many things into question. And I think about how I would have I can hardly talk about it, how I would feel if I were facing losing a child, an adult child. I think I'd freak out. And it's your faith and what do you believe and what is the right thing and what do you want for someone else, and ultimately has to be he and his wife's decision, I'm sure. But but I really want to be careful and tread gently, because I never would want to say or do something that went against their feelings.
that they're on this journey, and you're just there to
the whole
witness
family
and
really
support.
is. And I mean, the immediate family, he has a sister, and so it's again the parents and his wife and then their children. And how do you deal with this? There's so many different layers and levels. So thank you for sharing that. I just I think sometimes it's just better to be thoughtful but silent, and along with my sister, say to my cousin that's able to speak with her sister, Kathy and Margie are thinking about you and your family, and have your whole family, all of you are in their prayers, and maybe that's just sufficient.
Kathy, what I can
Go ahead.
do is to put those people and thereby myself on the prayer list at St. Francis, because sometimes other people being aware of it allows me to figure out what I need to do. And
Yeah.
nobody else knows about that. So it's kind of a sneak tactic.
Mhm. Well, I do believe that prayer, I mean, it depending on what you're praying or how you're praying, I mean, we don't know what the answers will be or how they will come or in what form. And you know, there's lots of ways to pray. And I had said something to my cousin about silent unity, which has been around for a long time, and it, you know, it's non-denominational, and you can call anytime to Missouri, which is where their Lee's Summit, and you can ask for prayer support, and there's somebody praying there all the time. And I think it's really powerful if people know about it, and it's still powerful even if you don't. But thank you, Judy. It's nice of you to mention that. And yeah, I think that's, you know, there's always avenues and that don't disrespect other people's spiritual values and beliefs.
You know, the thing of it is that there's a couple different kinds of prayer, and we always think of the vertical prayer, you know, between us and God. But one of the most important prayers is how it connects us this way, horizontally, and puts us in the hands of each other as we go along. That alone, whether there was any vertical part at all, is worth us doing.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting, and I think that's you could do a good commentary on that. You know, yeah, and I think you're right. So often we think of it in a sort of one-dimensional concept or one-dimensional way. And well, you think about prayer in that the prayers we say together in a service.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that meaningful and powerful? Well, because it's a shared moment.
Yeah.
Sure.
I've always told people that those are my worst prayers that I pray. Why? Because one person speaking for 100 is a pretty hard thing to do. But in some ways they're the best prayers because it's us speaking, being together in a moment, and it's not as much about the words. It's about the togetherness, the community that's there.
I think so too. Thank you. Thank you very much, all of you, for your input. That's very helpful.
Well, and the goodness is that you have people who have gone through things like that, like what Nancy said. And sometimes the going through of those things is what helps form us much better, differently, but much better than the easy times, right? It's because it's when we have to decide what is it in our faith that is important.
It's so peculiar because my cousin's mother, which was my aunt through my mother, she died of a glioblastoma. She died. It's like, I think it's coming up on 23 years ago now, and it's just so weird that this has occurred. It's a different form. There's, I guess, about 100 forms of brain cancer, but it's not a good kind to have come back on you. So for sure.
Yeah. As you've been talking, I was thinking about one of my heroes. Her name was Carol Chase, and that's what she ultimately died from as well, when she was 40, and that seemed very young for me at the time. I was like 35, and it was just like, wait, that can't happen.
Yeah. Not in the scheme of things at all. It doesn't seem right ever.
Yeah. But to bring it back around to our topic, those types of moments are sometimes where we discover why someone is our hero, because they give us some kind of glimpse that we didn't have before that time, right? So we're going to talk about heroes today, which is opposed to last week, where we're talking beyond the veil. Heroes are sometimes beyond the veil, but we hold them differently than just someone who's passed on. We hold them because they somehow, through life, became part of the signposts for us that showed us direction, showed us ways to go and do the things that we did. So I want to ask us, all of us have multiple heroes. But I want us to just stick to one hero each today, if we can, as much as possible. The others will kind of crowd in, but and just kind of use that as a way to be able to look at how heroes work. And I'm going to ask a series of 3 questions. I'm going to tell you the first 2 right at first, so that you don't take too long answering the first question, because the second question is coming. Okay. So the second question, it's talking about your heroes, and I'm going to ask about what are the major teachings of that hero. So don't get into what it is that your hero taught you. The first question has to do with naming for us your hero and describing how they gained that status for you in some way or another. Why is it that they became who they are? Try not to get into all of what they taught you, but try to say just where did they get there? And I want to do it that way just so that we can hear each other's heroes first of all. And so I'm going to start so you have a time to think about one of your heroes. And his name is Philip Jose Farmer. And in the science fiction world, that's a pretty known name. He's a marvelous science fiction writer. But it was because of this book, I'm going to share it with you, that I came to know him. And the picture on this book and the name of the book just floored me. Dark as the sun. It's set in the far future as the sun is darkening and the world's about to come to an end. And just the pictures that are there, which reflect very adequately the characters. You know, it's like Neanderthals, cavemen type people and who is this green thing, right? So all of that said, here's somebody who dreams huge. Dreams huge. And that's why he became my hero. So tell me about one of your heroes and tell me how that person gained the status for you. Nancy, do you want to go next?
Okay, I came up with Mrs. Marquis, my 5th grade teacher, and we ended up being friends after I had her as a 10-year-old, up until her death, and she died in her 90s, and we visited often. And when my mother was dying, she came over with a bag of a watermelon in a plastic bag, and she took me out for a drive, and we talked about my mom dying. And she, I think, gained that position of hero, not for the accomplishments that she did, but maybe the way she treated me, and also her outlook on life. You know, you talk about heroes showing a signpost. Her enthusiasm for travel and for people of multiple ethnicities, and her
Don't talk about all the major teachings. We're going to get to that.
okay, and then I'm done.
I hope you notice just between those two that Nancy has a hero for a very different reason than what I have a hero for. Now, she might be able to identify a hero that she has that's kind of along the lines of mine, and I might be able to identify a hero kind of along the lines of hers. But we get heroes in a number of different ways. So Judy, tell me about one of your heroes.
You have to unmute.
The phone went, so
Yeah.
Well, the person that comes to my mind first is my Aunt Grace. And I was telling Nancy the other day that by the time I was born, she had 4 teenagers of her own. But she took the time to just verify how special I was to her by teaching me how to knit before I was 9 years old, and how to crochet. And I mean, those things are not easy to teach, and especially to a squirmy little kid.
Yeah.
Each of her children were amazing in their own right, but she still took time with other people's kids. And I didn't know her as an adult. She died when I was, I think, in my teens, early teens. But I've just always admired her.
Nice. Thank you so very much. Catherine, tell me about one of your heroes.
Well, I've been thinking about, people that meant something to me, and I guess I could think about people, in growing up, but I long admired for quite some long time Mother Teresa, and simply because she embodied being humble and always of service, and choosing to put herself out there.
Thank you. And I like that we have a couple of heroes that are public figure heroes, right? Philip Jose Farmer and Mother Teresa, and two that are personal family type of heroes, because many of our heroes fall in one of those two categories, don't they? Somebody who is very close to us. In fact, Nancy and I were talking about this before you guys came in. Is it a different way that a hero forms? And in some ways it is, because obviously I never got to meet Philip Jose Farmer. He didn't put yarn in my hands like Judy's aunt did, right? But in some ways they're not as dissimilar as what we think. They somehow show us and teach us in ways, some kind of ways. Nancy, you look like you have something to say.
No, I was dwelling on what you just said. I was pensively taking in what you said.
Okay, good. So what are the major teachings of your hero? Why do you continue to remember them, 20, 40, 70 years later, however long it is? What did it for you? So let me tell you a little bit about Philip Jose Farmer. He wrote another series of books called Riverworld, and it's just a magnificent book where Richard Burton, not the actor, the explorer, he's the man who discovered much of deepest, darkest Africa. Like some people credit him with being the discoverer of the source of the Nile. Okay. He's the main character of this series of books. And again, the title just captivated me. It was called To Your Scattered Bodies Go. Isn't that an interesting title? And what happens is that all of a sudden, Richard Burton, who had lived way before me, all of a sudden just ends up alive again, right? And he's looking around going, where am I? What's going on here? And everybody who's ever lived in all these ages of humankind end up on this huge river that just snakes back and forth across this thing. And the possibilities that life is more than just what my little piece says, my little piece in time, my little piece in space, my little piece of thought is now intermixed with all these other things. And so you might have a Neanderthal that sits next to a spaceman, and they're all together in this little world and suddenly interacting with each other. A Mark Twain might be next to a King Arthur, right? And how would you react to some of those characters from the past when they're right in front of you? And how are they different? And so all of that just expanded. And I first came to know Philip Jose Farmer when I was in my early 20s, before I was 25. And it told me the world is bigger than what you think. Because I've been taught a really good world, but it was pretty defined by here's all the sides of it. And what he did is say, and that was incredible for that young mind, because it made it so that I could take so many steps. So it was going so many different directions beyond what most of my family would. So what are the major teachings of your hero for you?
Well, enthusiasm for life. Mrs. Marquis showed me a photograph of herself at the shore of the Mediterranean. And I was new to, my family never traveled abroad at that point. And her arms were outstretched and she was just like, it was like glorious that she was there and taking in the Mediterranean. And I thought, wow, if she's like that, then it must be worth going to. She was also the teacher I had when JFK was shot and killed, and the message came to our classroom, and she was told, and she broke out crying in front of this 5th grade class, and it was like, wow, whatever the news is, it's got to be pretty powerful for Mrs. Marquis to be crying in front of us. And I didn't really understand what it all meant, but I knew what it meant from her reaction. And so I think that enthusiasm for life, the leaving of it and the going to it is something that impressed me. I want that signpost. I want to follow that.
Yeah. I love that you described someone who is both very human and otherworldly all at once. Like your worldly is what I mean. Like she was very much present in the midst of you, but also showed you way beyond you. Nice. I like that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
How about the rest of you? What teachings did your hero give to you?
Well, I think for me, it was that Mother Teresa just kept on being herself, no matter where she ended up in the world, and saw herself, I think, differently than we all seem to see her, because she was very, very honest with herself and felt that she had failings or things that she was still working on, but she didn't let that get in the way of her service and being with people who were poor and of need, and just that abundant love that was, always shining from her.
One thing I love about what you said is, because Mother Teresa is a hero of mine as well, is I hear you saying that she made decisions or showed you things that were grand, so to speak.
Mhm.
Even in this, because she was about small actions, but the life that led to those small actions was grand, and it makes you kind of have to dream. Can I be something like that?
Mhm.
Can I take those steps? For me, Philip Jose Farmer was an author, and I've never dreamt of being an author so much as I say I'm a good writer, but the discipline to write a book. But he said you can have the discipline to do other things. And so who he was, while it was beyond me, also drew me into a better me.
Mhm.
Nice. Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah.
Judy, what were the major teachings of your hero?
Sorry, I had to interrupt. That was Jan's brother on the phone from England, so I
Oh,
had to take the phone back to her.
that's probably a good idea to get the phone to her.
Yeah. Yeah, I've thought a lot about my Aunt Grace, and the major thing I got from her was the importance of each individual, no matter what size they are. But I don't know, when I started growing up, in hindsight, it seems as though this wasn't necessarily the case in my family, but in general, children were not appreciated. That's not quite the right word, but it was at the fringe of that be seen and not heard.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Someday they'll be worth listening to, type of thing.
Well, maybe not even that, and it was all unspoken, so I can't be specific with it. But this was a woman who, even in the midst of a big family gathering, would pay attention to me. I mean, I was aware of her paying attention to me, probably to other children as well. But as I was telling Nancy, she would come and we'd always be excited if we saw her car at the house when we got home from school, because that meant she had been there early enough to put pennies under the corners. This was in the Midwest, under the corners of the carpet and those covers on the arms of the chairs and the doilies on the table. And she'd say, well, I had to come today because the good fairy stopped by my house. And she forgot to tell you that she'd left you pennies. And so we'd go scrambling for these pennies.
Try to find them all over.
Well, yeah, and I mean, she was not only making us feel special, but she was giving us permission to imagine.
Yeah.
And I don't know that happens even now very often. The kids are given permission to just pretend.
Yeah. Yeah.
And imagine things are different than they really are. But the other thing she did was she would cut out pictures from those old-fashioned magazines that had real artists doing the illustrations and write stories for my brother and I with us in the picture. I mean, she would pretend that the picture was about us and then mail it to us, even though she lived maybe 10 miles away. And so we would get mail as little kids.
Mm-hmm.
And stories with our names in them. I mean,
Yeah.
now you pay and somebody will publish a book with your kid's name in it. But I know that it mattered. And so I reflect on that and think it's no wonder I taught first grade. I mean, I almost had no choice with that kind of example of what an impact one adult can make on a kid.
Yeah. Well, and that's the next question really is, what did they do to you, right? Who are you today because of that? And what I hear in you, Judy, is that your aunt gave you magic, right?
Mhm.
Perspective of that imaginative space that not everyone does. Like I had two grandmothers. One was the grandmother who told stories. The other was the one who sent Christmas presents for all 9 kids, just all lumped together in one big box and none of them wrapped. Right? She did the duty, right? And the other brought the imagination. And so that's what I hear in that, Judy, is she's the one who taught you that magic still lives. That's a good hero to follow. So how about the rest of you? How did your hero frame this present moment? Who are you today because of that hero?
Well, I think I followed in her footsteps as far as being a teacher and enjoying travel and dance and art. And she was an encourager, and she said to my mom once, I overheard it, listening through the door, I wish I had 25 dances in my class. It's like, really? And I still remember that to this day.
Mm-hmm.
So what I try to do is to encourage children and try to tell them how wonderful they are. And so she was that signpost of, I think, being a good teacher. I think I'm a better teacher because I had her as a role model.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the way she made me feel is the way I want my students to feel. Because like Judy, the way she felt because her aunt was so loving to her, wow, that if you can give that to others, that's just a gift. So
yeah, it's amazing to have somebody who shows you yourself so that you can say, that she was also appears here in me, you know, because sometimes we don't see that in ourselves until we see it in someone else. So thank you. How about the rest of you? How does that relationship continue to frame today?
I think for me, it's about showing up and being present, and in small ways. I'm never going to make a huge splash, but it's not necessary. It's simply to show up and recognize opportunities that are presented probably pretty regularly to help someone else, to be of service, to not be self-satisfied, because I'm not, or smug. Simply knowing that I still screw up at times, and then I have to fix it, or I have to go back to the drawing board. And I think Mother Teresa just retained her own selfhood, wherever, however she formed herself through her life, and just, I'll show up and I'll do what's put before me. There's something I can do. There's something I can do.
Yeah.
There's always something I can do.
And I love that about Mother Teresa, right? One of her quotes that I love is the one that says something like, "Not all of us do great things, but we can do small things in great ways."
Mhm.
Right? And she wasn't necessarily changing the world. She was changing a corner of Calcutta, but it showed you that you can change your corner of the world.
Yeah.
That's an amazing thing, isn't it? I like that a lot. Judy, who are you today? How does that relationship frame you today?
Well, when I was teaching, I would always send postcards to my kids during the summer, especially if I went someplace. I'd send them postcards, and the next year they would come with these tattered cards that they'd been holding, and their parents would say they were so excited to get a piece of mail. And so I still use the post office, and I'm dismayed now when things are slow to be delivered. I think it's a personal affront to me that I can't rely on the post office as much as I once did. It all seems to be a conspiracy of some sort, but eventually it gets through. But and I still get feedback that matters to kids. To get something in the mail from somebody they're not expecting is still a good thing to do. I have never taught anybody to knit or crochet, though.
Judy, I wanted just to intersect that I've kept the cards you've sent me and put them on a bulletin board. So it's not just the kids.
Nice.
It's the older people too that enjoy getting mail that's not junk mail. It's like so rare to get a real letter from someone. It's a joy. Yeah. So thank you.
That.
Well, and can I say, Judy, I think it's important what you said about what how you're not like your aunt, because the last thing the world needs is for you to just be your aunt, because we already have your aunt. You have to take from that person and become who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in some ways it's kind of like, okay, so my aunt formed this finger, but who formed this finger and who formed this one, right? Who are the different heroes that have built the person that is me? Who else have I drawn from? And each one of those helps set the framework. Some of them in greater ways, some of them in small ways, some of them in negative ways. because some of the anti-heroes that we are not that because of them,
Mhm.
right? They acted in such a way and we said, that's not what I'm going to do. And that's a forming of us as well, isn't it?
And I thought, sorry, I've got a frog this morning. As I was reading the chapter, I was realizing too that I've had a long-standing reluctance to make heroes out of people.
Hmm,
Um,
good point.
I, and Jim, you may have sensed this about me from the beginning of your term here, but there are people who sort of deify the pastors.
Yeah.
And I think, no, their strength is in being persons.
Yeah.
Not idols.
Right.
And what I really get well, not upset, but a bit nervous about is when somebody tries to put me on a pedestal, because I know that base is going to crack and I'm going to come tumbling down and there will be no more idol or pedestal or admiration kind of thing, because I'm human through and through. There's just all kinds of flaws and cracks and idiosyncrasies that people don't know until they start looking.
Mhm.
The difference, I think, Judy, what you're talking about though, is do we have a hero or are we worshiping our hero?
Yeah.
Right? Have we turned that hero into something that the hero is not? Because if I only speak Philip Jose Farmer's voice, then I really haven't gone anywhere, because he already had that voice.
Mhm.
It's not good enough for me to just reiterate that, but to learn from him how to be a better me is incredible. So I'm not going to become a novelist. That's not my way of being, even though my hero, that was his way of being. I have to do who Jim is. But much of what he does, bringing imagination into a space, drawing the large limits that he did, allowed me to say, it doesn't have to, in many ways, he is one of the reasons why I was able to leave Mormonism, because he said the world is bigger than just that paradigm, right? So that's what we have to do, is not worship so much as learn from.
Mhm.
And like with the different fingers, realize that this hero is not in charge of doing all this stuff for us. Mother Teresa, as wonderful as what she is, may not be the role model that brings you to Calcutta to do the same work that she did. But it may make it so that you do some similar type of work here in Tucson. So now broaden yourself beyond just that one hero that you've talked about. Who else added pieces of you? Who are some of those other heroes? For example, who gave you a listening ear because they listened to you? Who gave you a questing heart, right? Because they lived their life searching for, right? I think about David Wilkinson, for example, speaking of heroizing our pastors. He was on the board of ordained ministry when I was going through the process. And his voice, while it was still a distant voice for me, was a voice that in that process, I heard him say the same thing that Philip Jose Farmer said: the possibilities are greater. I'm not going to sit here and say, because you're doing this, you're eliminated. And I heard him in the midst of those meetings essentially tell me the same story. So who are your other heroes? We can't go into them in as much depth as what we've done with these first heroes, but who are they for you?
I have a lot of authors who are heroes of mine. Alice Walker and Maya Angelou changed my life in the 60s when I first read their books. Um, and there's a whole slew of them since then. I really try to read authors from different cultures to see if I can understand what's happening.
Yeah.
But the notion of calling on those heroes seemed kind of superfluous for me because I read their words.
Yeah.
And so they speak to me through what's been printed for general consumption, and I personalize it. And it becomes their word for me. So I've never even experimented with the notion of what would Maya Angelou say to me right now.
Yeah. Let me read a poem by one of my heroes. Sorry, I went blank for a second there so that I could stand up and you wouldn't have to look at something you might not want to see up close, because I had to reach across the thing here. It's called I Bought a Book. It says, within that book that I had bought, I found a precious hidden thought. Among its pages hidden there, a pleasant thought that I could share. I read it over line by line until that hidden thought was mine. A thief broke in and stole my book, but only the leaves and binding took. Yes, stole the printed page alone. The author's thought had become my own. It matters not where my book may be. Its real value stayed with me.
Oh, wow.
I had just that page of this book. It's a small book, but I had just that page when I was a freshman in college, about the time when I was discovering Philip Jose Farmer. And that author, that poem reminded me that like you, Judy, I hold on to these things, even though the book goes beyond me, right? You don't have to keep hearing the voice because you carry the voice with you. That's my grandpa's book, by the way.
He wrote that poem.
He wrote that poem. Yeah.
Wow, that's impressive.
Oh, see, now your grandpa is one of my heroes.
He is one of my heroes as well, right? Because of some of the things he did. This was his very first book called Spittin' and Whittlin'.
Cute.
That's cool.
So other heroes.
Well, I'd have to say Helen Keller is one of mine. I directed The Miracle Worker twice, and I saw a lot of documentaries on her life and read things she wrote. And I had problems with my vision as a child. My parents didn't realize I couldn't see well, and so reading became a problem. So E's and O's and C's, I couldn't tell the difference. And then my mom felt so guilty that she hadn't had my eyes checked. Then I had to get glasses at 9. And then I had contacts. And then I had laser surgery. And then I had cataract surgery. So, I had issues with my eyes and my vision. And so, of course, I looked at her, who was blind and deaf, and yet she got degrees and she traveled and she wrote and she had an amazing life, that those major obstacles didn't stop her. And that's to be admired. So I don't know, she just reminds me, you don't have it so bad. Keep going.
Yeah. And that's a good lesson for us to all learn. We all learn it from different heroes, right? Any other heroes?
Well, I think I'm thinking of a great aunt who was feisty, and she was a twin, and she got more education than her brothers did, which is pretty amazing back in the day. And she went to college. I mean, she taught. And she, years ago, she went to St. Louis, and this was from living in Wisconsin. So she went to St. Louis and she actually taught Vincent Price when he was a kid or young person. And she never married. She was a Christian Scientist, which was also pretty unique. Rest of our family was basically Methodist and Protestant and stuff, but she leaned towards Christian Science, and she broke her wrist one time and she didn't go to the doctor, but she healed herself. And she just marched to her own beat, and she didn't do always what was expected of her, which was probably a good thing. She did the unexpected, and she lived to be quite old. And she was a cat person who she spoiled. She had these cats that got to be very elderly, and she had a male cat, and his name was Lawrence Kitty McGregor. And you dare not sit in his chair. He'd come and stare you down, and you'd have to move. But he had quite a personality, as did she. But I liked her for her spunkiness and for her being always, I think, totally herself. And she got to be pretty old. So I have some memories of her from back when, and just I think I'm proud of her for having gotten the education and doing something with it.
Yeah, that's a good hero to have.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the sharing you guys have done today, and all your heroes, and all the other ones I see kind of fluttering in the back of your mind, because as Nancy would tell her story, I would see the other two of you going, yeah, I got somebody like that, right? And and vice versa, that as we talked, you allowed me to remember other heroes. And those heroes are nice. I love the quote that said here, where it says, life shrinks or expands in proportion to one's courage. And when you think of your heroes, it gives me the courage to discover more of my heroes.
Is that quote in the book?
Yeah, that's on page 159. It's by Nen.
Oh yeah. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's good.
And at least part of what our heroes are trying to do is they're trying to give us the courage to expand, right?
Yeah.
And open ourselves up to something else. So every one of your heroes helped me to expand and see more of my heroes. So I appreciate it. So next,
thank you, Jim. I appreciate you asking us to dream huge.
Yeah. Next week we have to do some of the hardest listening, and that's listening in the silence, listening to the silence. It's not our first choice often. We like hearing voices, or at least noises, sometimes more than silence. So read that last chapter and continue our journey deeper and deeper into the listening process.
And it's short. It's only 10 pages.
Yes, very short. But thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you,
see you
everyone.
next
Have
time.
a good week. Thank you all much, Leah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.